where you're checking in from. See everybody coming in. Let us know where you're checking in from, where you're logging into this webinar from. We're happy to have you here. Hello, Calgary, Chicago, Indiana, yay. Give people another minute to check in and let us know where you're logging in from, and we'll get started. Hi, New York. Frosty San Francisco, I beg to differ. we're like minus 20. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's ILEA Keynote webinar. My name is Gwendolyn McNutt, CSCP, and I'm the chair of the ILEA Professional Development Committee. Today we'll be presenting Creating a Sustainable Strategic Diversity Plan powered by Giants Enterprises. Thank you, Giants Enterprises, for your continued support. We're very excited to bring you today's presentation. We hope that you come away with new ideas, perspectives, and strategies to apply to your own businesses and careers. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. We will be recording today's session, and it will be posted on the ILEA Hub shortly. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them at the end of the discussion as we can. Also, share your thoughts and comments in the chat. And finally, share your experience on social media using the hashtags ILEA Webinar Wednesday and ILEA Welcomes All. It's also a perfect time to become a CSCP. The Certified Special Events Professional designation was established in 1993 to recognize event professionals who have successfully demonstrated the knowledge, skills, and ability essential to perform all components of a special event. ILEA endorses and manages the voluntary CSCP program for those who meet established standards. For more information and to sign up for updates, please visit www.ileahub.com/CSCP. Apply anytime. Applications for prospective CSCPs are now being accepted. So today's keynote speaker is Lisa G. Williams. Lisa is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and strategist. She is passionate about ensuring those who have been traditionally underrepresented in society to have equitable access to the workforce, to business contacts, and to corporate services and products. After more than a decade as a civil rights lawyer, she shifted to diversity work where she has helped companies achieve record representations of African Americans, Latinos, and women, and earned awards for her diversity strategies for dismantling structural and environmental barriers for people with disabilities. She's excited to help businesses grow bigger than ever before, become industry leaders, and reap the benefits of engaged employees, vendors, and customers who align with their successes and with their business's success. Lisa holds a bachelor's in arts and political science from the University of Michigan, a Juris Doctor from the University of Illinois College of Law at Champaign-Urbana, and attended graduate school at the School of Labor and Employment Relations, formerly known as the Institute of Labor and Industrial Relations. And Lisa's cultural background has been a constant guessing game for people. They've speculated that she's Puerto Rican, Brazilian, Mexican, Asian, Arabic, Black, East Indian, Native American, Italian, or Greek. As a child, she resented being seen as ambiguous, but as an adult, she considers it her superpower and embraces it as one of her natural strengths that helps her in her professional role. She's noticed that it allows her to be relatable to a wide and diverse community, many of which seem to claim her as her own. Please welcome Lisa G. Williams. Lisa?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Gwen, for that wonderful introduction. I am so excited to be here and share this information with you. I have lots of information to share, and I really hope it's useful to you. Now, there is no way to cover in this brief amount of time everything that is available here. If I speak too quickly, or if there are topics you want to delve into more deeply, you can always get in touch after the presentation. I believe they will put my LinkedIn profile hyperlink in the chat, and it's also included at the end of the presentation, which I will share at this point. There is a varying array of knowledge among the audience members. Some have heard a lot of this before. To some of this will be new information. I'm going to try to give all of you some new information that you can take away to help you professionally and also, quite frankly, personally. I know I've grown a lot personally as I've learned this information over the years. So let's begin. This presentation is about crafting a sustainable strategic diversity plan. The tagline is, where do we go from here? Now, I am keenly aware that this is a groundbreaking time for the live events industry due to the pandemic and the safe distancing regulations that have completely decimated the way live events are operating and will require a brand new direction for your businesses. As you rebuild, this is actually an ideal time to interweave diversity principles into your business, because this way diversity will become integral to your organization. So starting with our title slide, after the tagline, I've included a quote about moving forward from Walt Disney, which is particularly relevant to live events at this unprecedented time. We keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Curiosity is actually an asset in diversity work because diversity is problem solving. You first have to figure out what the problem is, and then you need to be creative about ways to address it. A one-size-fits-all approach does not work here. The best diversity initiatives will be tailored to the way your organization uniquely operates. Okay, let's see. My slide is not. Okay, so here's the overview for the presentation. First, we will discuss what diversity is and what it is not. Then we're going to talk about why diversity is crucial for any business that wants to succeed, because it is statistically correlated with increased profit, industry leadership, and organizational health. We will learn about unconscious bias and how it can undermine all of our good diversity efforts if we are not careful. And I will give you some exercises to go through. Next, I will give you specific diversity initiatives that you can implement. We only have time today to focus on the workforce, yet there are also opportunities for diversity in your vendor pool and in your customer base. These will round out. This is real life, folks. These will round out your diversity efforts and help your businesses even more. After that, we're going to talk about how to use a data-based approach. Leveraging data is the equivalent of using a flashlight to see in the dark. Without it, you're just groping along, and any successes are likely to be merely incidental. Finally, I will leave you with some now to begin enriching the diversity of your workforce and boosting your profit. So let's talk about what diversity is and what it is not. When we talk about diversity, the most obvious reference the law has recognized have historically been marginalized. These populations are characterized by race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, gender identity and sexual orientation, national origin, age, 40 or older, and disability or genetic information. I do encourage you to have these groups at top of mind because these populations are often overlooked, and your goal is to find the best qualified candidate, and that person could be in one or more of these groups. But also think about other forms of diversity. marital status, educational background, geographic residence. We are now in a virtual world. Socioeconomic status, appearance, including height, weight, hairstyle, and really anybody with a different background, set of experiences and perspectives. Note that you can't ask employees or applicants about their backgrounds unless it's related to the job, but try to be cognizant that instead of looking for a cultural fit, look for who will add to your culture. As an initial matter, we are not talking about lowering standards to give entry to people who are not qualified to do the work. Your goal as a business owner is to find the person who is best qualified to accomplish your goals. The problem is there are a plethora of barriers preventing that ideal candidate from getting into your workforce and flourishing once they get there. If you want your business to succeed, you'll need to identify those barriers and eliminate or at least reduce them. Then there's inclusion. You can't just toss a bunch of different folks in a room and expect the beauty that flows from diversity to happen naturally. Everyone's opinions must be invited, welcomed, and valued. When you're not open to opposing views, you deprive yourself of an outcome that you could not come up with on your own. And none of us is good enough to come up with the perfect outcome all by ourselves or with those who think just like we do all of the time. So let's start with an overview of the most powerful information first. Diversity is statistically correlated with profitability. McKinsey & Company has published a trilogy of reports on the profitability of diversity and inclusion. In January 2015, based on a 2014 study, January 2018, based on a 2017 study, and May 2020, based on a 2019 study. Now, the overall conclusion here is that the more diversity there is in leadership, the more profitable your business will be. The less diversity there is, the less profitable. And this statistical fact is becoming more and more true as the years go by. In this chart, the blue bar represents the companies with the most diversity. The black bar represents the companies with the least diversity. McKinsey found that companies with the most women in leadership positions in 2014 were 15% more likely to be profitable than companies with the least. This number rose in 2017 to 21% and rose again in 2019 to 25%. These figures were even more compelling in the case of racial and ethnic diversity. In 2014, the companies with the most racial diversity in leadership were 35% more likely to outperform companies with the least racial diversity in leadership when it came to profitability. 33% in 2017 and a whopping 36% in 2019. Profitability is higher, you'll note, for racial diversity than for gender diversity. Plus, the greater the diversity, the higher the likelihood of outperformance on profitability. Companies with more than 30% women executives were more likely to outperform companies with 10 to 30% women executives. And in turn, these companies were more likely to outperform those with even fewer women executives. So we've seen that businesses that are diverse and inclusive dominate their industries. Conversely, companies with the least amount of diversity in leadership are statistically less likely to achieve above average financial returns. That is, they not only fail to lead, they lag. In 2014, companies with the least amount of gender diversity in leadership were 9% more likely than their counterparts with greater diversity to underperform on profitability. In 2017, this figure was 15%, and in 2019, the figure was 19%. So this gap between profitability and companies with the greatest and the least amount of diversity is growing. At companies with the least amount of both gender and racial diversity, the profitability penalty was even steeper in 2019. They were 27% more likely to underperform on profitability than all other companies in the data set. So let's talk about the incredible benefits of diversity and inclusion. We see on this slide that McKinsey & Company found that companies embracing diversity and inclusion are better able to win top talent, that employee satisfaction rises along with the quality of the business decisions, and that all of this leads to a virtuous cycle of increasing returns. Now, there's going to be a lot of information on this slide, but don't worry about trying to capture everything. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint after the presentation. So this slide is really for you to read through later. I'll just cover the highlights. Decades of statistical research by organizational scientists, psychologists, sociologists, economists, and demographers demonstrates that diversity and inclusion dramatically improve problem solving, decision-making, and innovation. Diversity leads to better problem solving within business teams. Diverse and inclusive business teams drive decision-making twice as fast with half the meetings and arrive at more valuable decisions 87% of the time. I've also cited a 2017 study that appeared in the Harvard Business Review that reports the faster problem-solving capabilities of diverse teams. Diversity also leads to increased innovation, and you'll find here studies showing 19 percentage points higher innovation revenues in companies with diverse management teams, and studies pointing to a higher likelihood of innovation leaders and change readiness in inclusive companies. Diversity also leads to improved employee satisfaction. Improved employee retention, because employees are more engaged, productive, and satisfied. And keeping your employees, especially your top performers, can have a massive impact on your company's bottom line. Employees who feel that their individuality is valued and that they uniquely contribute to the goals of the company they work for are more likely to stay with the company. Engagement is a deciding factor in whether employees stay with or leave a company. A study by the Center for American Progress shows how expensive turnover is for business. The average cost for a company turning over skilled jobs is 213% of the cost of 1 year's compensation for that role. All of this fuels organizational health. When employees become more motivated to fully exercise their skills and talents, their productivity increases. This in turn sparks a more high-functioning organization in a better position to accomplish its goals. Note that diversity and inclusion benefits everyone, regardless of race, ethnicity, or what position they hold in the organization. So we can see that diversity and inclusion should be our top business goal. But before we go any further, we do have to talk about unconscious bias, what it is and how it thwarts our diversity efforts. Unconscious bias is within all of us, me included. And I'm a woman of color, I'm Jewish. I grew up in the 70s listening to Free to Be You and Me, and I have made social justice my life's work. But I have hundreds of unconscious biases. We all do. Numerous studies during the past 20 years confirm that people harbor unconscious bias even when they explicitly believe that racism is wrong. A Harvard researcher found that most of us believe that we are good decision makers, able to objectively size up a job candidate and reach a fair and rational conclusion that's in our best interests and in the best interests of our organization. But more than 2 decades of research confirms that in reality, most of us fall woefully short of our inflated self-perception. Unconscious bias is everywhere. It's instantaneous, it's instinctive, it's hardwired into our brain, and it drives our behavior. They're shaped by years of societal influences, media, family, community, education, social and professional environments, lack of familiarity with different, so much more. And researchers are still struggling to determine how we can overcome them since they are so embedded within us. And most importantly, they subtly guide our behavior and drive our decision-making despite our best intentions. There are hundreds of types of unconscious bias, but we will focus on a few. Basically, unconscious biases are learned associations. When I say peanut butter and, you say jelly. When I say night and, you know I'm saying day. Spaghetti and, meatballs. These are common associations that we've learned and don't even question. I want to start with an exercise that shows us that we can't always trust what our brains are telling us. This is because this is the point of unconscious bias. We can't tell it's a bias because it's so instinctive that we believe it. Let's start with a simple exercise that seemingly has nothing to do with diversity. Actually, we're going to use the poll feature in Zoom so that you can input your response. You'll get about 15 seconds. There's a sentence on the slide. I'd like you to count the number, and also in the chat, in the poll, and I'd like you to count the number of times the letter F appears. Here's the sentence. Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of years. The poll in the chat asks you how many times the letter F appears, 3 times through 8 times. We'll take just a few seconds while I try and get resettled, and then we will show you the results. Okay, so it looks like this is what most people get. Most people get 3. Thank you so much for showing the poll results. The correct answer is 6, and I will show you where they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, why can't you count the F's in the ofs? Because of is pronounced like OV. Your subconscious mind has it locked in as OV, while your conscious mind is looking at it as OF. Notice how the subconscious mind is more powerful than the conscious mind. Okay, let's go through a couple of common unconscious biases. The first one is affinity bias. And this is the tendency to gravitate towards people we deem similar to ourselves and to avoid people we deem dissimilar. The one example I always give is, say I'm interviewing a job candidate. Part of my educational history includes the University of Michigan. Say a candidate also went to the University of Michigan. My affinity bias is likely to add positive qualities to that candidate. I'm likely to assume they're hardworking, have a good work ethic, and I'll get along well with them. Say a different candidate went to Michigan State, one of our rival schools. I may think that's a party school. This person won't be able to keep up with the workload. They're going to negatively affect our work environment. None of this could be true. This is all in my head. Let's say that the truth is that the Michigan State candidate is actually the higher qualified candidate. But I'm more likely to rate the Michigan candidate higher, and this does a disservice to my company and to the Michigan State candidate. Remember, my goal as an interviewer is to find the best qualified candidate. Studies have shown that similarity is one of the most significant factors influencing the attraction to candidates during assessment and leads hiring managers to be inclined to, quote, hire in their own image. Unfortunately, this bias can perpetuate homogeneous organizations of employees that look, sound, and act alike. If your organization is truly committed to enhancing diversity, those involved in recruitment and talent management must take deliberate action to change the status quo. Another type of unconscious bias we're going to discuss is confirmation bias, also known as groupthink. This is the tendency to not disrupt consensus, even when consensus is wrong. A study by Solomon Ash highlighted the tendency for people to be swayed by the opinions of others when participants were asked to rate the length of a line compared to a sample of other lines. So in this study, one line was clearly shorter than all of the other lines. Although this difference in line sizes was absolutely clear, if participants were told that their peers had chosen that all of the lines were the same length, over 75% also chose this incorrect answer. And if you've been part of a hiring panel, you've probably seen the impact of the majority opinion that it can have on others. Panelists may go along with the group because it's easier, or because the group response causes them to question the validity of their own opinion. This is particularly true when organizational leaders sit amongst the majority. And we'll discuss ways to overcome this bias when we get to workplace solutions. Next, we have confirmation bias. This is the tendency to selectively absorb information that confirms previously existing beliefs and to discard contradictory information. There is an experiment that was conducted by the leadership consulting firm NextGen. The consulting firm drafted a legal memo with the help of law firm partners. The memo was sent to 60 law firms across the country. The law firms were told this was a writing analysis study. Now, there were several errors that were deliberately inserted into the memo. Spelling errors, grammatical errors, errors in fact, errors in analysis, and substantive technical writing errors. Partners in the firms were asked to analyze the memo. It was a diverse group of partners, and they were told it was written by Thomas Meyer. Half of them were told Thomas Meyer was Black, and half of them were told Thomas Meyer was white. Same exact memo. The only difference was the race of Thomas Meyer. So now we have our second poll question, and it is, do you think there was any difference in the average scores given to the memo, same memo, if the memo was drafted by Thomas Meyer White or Thomas Meyer Black? Well, it looks like we've got a really smart group of participants. This is true. The memo drafted by Thomas Meyer, believed to be white, did receive a higher score. In fact, it received a rating of 4 out of 5, while the memo drafted by the Thomas Meyer, believed to be Black, received an average rating of 3 out of 5. Notice that 4 out of 5 is an 80%, 3 out of 5 is a 60%. There were also drastically different qualitative comments. Thomas Meyer, believed to be white, was described in generally positive terms. He was praised for his potential and good analytical skills. Black Thomas Meyer, on the other hand, was criticized as average at best and needing a lot of work, and even inspired the comment, "I can't believe he went to NYU." Now we have our third poll question, and that is, do you think that the race of the law partner reviewing Thomas Meyer's memo had an impact on that rating? All right, so yeah, significantly, there actually was no meaningful correlation between the grading partner's race or gender and the pattern of errors found in the memos. Unconscious bias is in all of us, like I said, and even the Black partners also gave Black Thomas Meyer a lower rating. Our only difference that we could tell was that female partners tended to find more errors and write longer narratives than male partners. The last poll question is about the objective factors. So remember that I said that there were certain errors that were inserted, spelling and grammar. Do you think when it came to these very objective errors, Was there any difference in the average rating when the review was focused on these objective errors between white Thomas Meyer's memo and black Thomas Meyer's memo? Okay. So actually, yeah, on average, the partners identified more spelling and grammar errors in the memo drafted by the Thomas Meyer believed to be black. On average, reviewers found 2.9 out of 7 spelling and grammar errors in the memo by white Thomas Meyer, and 5.8 of the 7 errors in the memo by the black Thomas Meyer. Now, even though the group putting on the study didn't even ask for formatting feedback, the partners chimed in with suggestions anyway. The memo drafted by white Thomas Meyer received 11 formatting suggestions. The memo, same memo, drafted by black Thomas Meyer received 29 formatting suggestions. Remember that the memos were identical and that the only distinction was whether the reviewer believed that Thomas Meyer was white or Thomas Meyer was black. Finally, a note about artificial intelligence. Don't be fooled when your analysis is based on logarithms. When Google first added video uploads to its YouTube mobile app, left-handed users who rotated the screen to give a landscape view saw an upside-down image. Why? Because the group that handled the project did not include left-handed people, and therefore they neglected to consider left-handed users. This is the same reason that facial recognition software is often best at recognizing faces belonging to white males and not good at recognizing faces belonging to women or people of color. And here are a few examples of systemic unconscious bias. For every 1% increase in a woman's body mass, it represents a 0.6% decrease in income. Also, in the United States, 14.5% of men are close to 6 feet tall. But if you look at Fortune 500 companies and their CEOs, 58% of them are close to 6 feet tall. So what's happening is the taller men are rising higher in the company more quickly. And does this have to do with how smart they are or how qualified they are at their jobs? 1 inch of height is worth approximately $789. Unconscious bias is powerful and bears massive costs for companies. Here are some of them. Reduced business profitability. And these are the opposites of what we talked about in terms of the benefits of diversity and inclusion.
Hey Lisa, this is Alexandra with HQ. Just a quick question. Were you able to plug in your battery? I just wanted to make sure nothing died mid-presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think.
I'll give you a second now to plug it in. Take your time.
Are you getting a low battery?
Yeah, I saw a couple prompts. I just didn't want it to die. I know it was at about 10% last time it came up.
Okay.
So as long as the cord's in, we should be good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a financial impact of employee turnover, failure to hire top talent, discriminatory decisions that you didn't intend, and legal exposure. So how do you overcome unconscious bias? Well, we don't really have time to go into grave detail here, but basically one should expose yourselves to repeated unconscious bias training so that you learn to challenge your own assumptions and encourage others to do the same. Change is hard, This is really difficult work. It's uncomfortable. Diversity and inclusion challenges the status quo of organizational culture. The status quo, no matter how unuseful, is a safety blanket, and diversity work always faces resistance. This is very difficult work, but it is worth it. I've come up with to show you some cartoons that are examples of how difficult this is. The first cartoon is an example of the wishful thinking that often occurs when we know change is necessary, but we don't want to do it. What if we don't change at all and magical just happens? If nothing changes, diversity won't just magically happen. This next cartoon is an example of clinging to the status quo for dear life, yet expecting results that only change can bring. I want you to find a bold and innovative way to do everything exactly the same way it's been done for 25 years. And finally, this cartoon exemplifies the fact that, I hope you can see it, that it's hard to get diversity of ideas when everyone is the same and diversity is lacking. Why don't we have any fresh ideas around here? In order for diversity to take flight, it must be intentional. It must be a priority. And as with any business initiative, there must be a plan. So now we're going to turn to very specific diversity initiatives that you can implement in your workforce that will remove systemic barriers to employment that are unrelated to the ability to do the job, that are blocking you from hiring and retaining the most qualified job candidate. We'll start with outreach. Employment outreach is crucial. This is the entry point into the workforce. The goal here is to attract a diverse pool of highly qualified job candidates. You have to take proactive measures to attract communities not well represented in your workforce. In one of my prior places of employment, when I began, jobs were shared by word of mouth. Well, we talked earlier about affinity bias and our human tendency to be drawn to those we deem similar to ourselves. This often results in the people we choose for our circle of friends and professional networks being like us. So when we turn to those networks for recruiting, the result is candidates that are similar to ourselves. And this is not a good way to build diversity. Remember that the best qualified job candidate could be just outside of that network and never hear about the position. Think also about recruiting in communities that speak languages other than English. Someone's aunt or cousin could be the one to tell your ideal candidate about your job. Evaluate whether the position is better served by having it filled by a bilingual candidate. Look at professional networks, schools, community groups that you haven't used before. Also consider the language used in your job posting. Studies have proven that even today, there is biased wording in job postings. Certain words have been proven to discourage women from applying, and certain words have been proven to attract women. Words like compassionate, nurturing, supportive tend to attract more women. On the other hand, words such as dominant, confident, and outspoken tend to attract men and dissuade women. Now, these are generalities. They do not apply to all women and men, but you should keep this in mind when you draft your job advertisements. Before posting the job, phrasing should be screened for gender-charged language. A free and easy to use language decoder is available online, and I've included a link to it in the resources page. Run your posting through the decoder and use a thesaurus to find inclusive alternatives for flagged language. Consider the different needs of people with disabilities. Contact a group that advocates on behalf of people with disabilities and ask them to ensure that your website is completely accessible in information presented, design, and system interoperability. There are tools online that will review online application systems for accessibility concerns, and I've included them in the resources slide. Note that the United States Department of Labor conducted a national survey 5 years ago and found that 46% of people with disabilities rated their last experience applying for a job online as difficult to impossible. That's nearly half. Include a conspicuous statement in your posting that you welcome diversity. Note here on the side that almost all, 86% of female millennials reported that policies on diversity were important to them as they considered potential employers. If you don't show that you have them, you may be deterring your ideal candidate from even applying for the job. Moving to the selection process. After all the work you put into getting a diverse applicant pool, you don't want to lose it because of barriers in the selection process. Implement unconscious bias training for everyone involved in the selection process because we have seen how it can completely undermine decision-making. Independent candidate review and ranking is important to combat confirmation bias. And that's the one where the tendency is to conform to the consensus or the highest authority in the room. This could eliminate candidates from advancing just because that person or persons didn't see what the rest of the reviewers treasured in the candidate. There are several benefits of having a diverse interview panel. It offers candidate review by a variety of perspectives, mitigates unconscious bias, and it improves interview quality. It increases the comfort level of underrepresented populations, which makes it easier for that candidate to communicate their qualifications. And that is the whole point of the interview, to call out the candidate's talents. Studies show that the demographic makeup of the interview panel will be similar to the demographic makeup of the new hire pool. So diversity on the interview panel is correlated with the diversity of who ultimately gets hired. Remember that the candidate is interviewing your company just as much as you're interviewing them. The presence or lack of diversity on the interview panel can attract or repel underrepresented candidates. Finally, there are suggestions to ensure that the work environment does not include common concerns that lead employees to look for other jobs. Make sure that people in similar roles have similar pay. Equally distributed career development opportunities. Oftentimes, the person who goes to lunch with the boss is the one who gets the best assignments, and that helps to your trajectory through the company. Look at why employees are leaving. Employees talk about your company. Happy ones deliver positive messages. And now we are going to move to, got a little out of order in my own slides here. Okay, data. In the beginning of this presentation, we talked about how data is like a flashlight that you use in the dark, showing you the way. There is a lot of HR software that's available that will help you conduct analyses that will enable you to better understand what your workforce looks like, where barriers to employment exist, where certain employees are having trouble with career advancement, why employees want to leave your company and why they want to stay, and whether you're paying employees similar pay for similar work. And getting started. Here are some tangible ideas that you can implement right now and or share with your leadership. We've talked about all of these except for the first, and I want to make sure that there's room for questions. Translate your website into the languages that you most frequently encounter or that are most prevalent in your service populations, according to the US Census. Though Google Translate is not perfect, it is a start, it's free, and it's easy to incorporate. Unconscious bias training. There are places that will offer it for free, like the Illinois Department of Human Rights. Research new networks for your outreach so that you're not always looking in the same places for the same talent. We talked about a gender decoder. It's very easy to run your job postings through and try and find alternatives for flagged language. Make sure that the entire process is accessible to people with disabilities. Remember that people are looking to see whether or not you value diversity. So visibly invite it and tout diversity policies. In order to make sure that interviewers are not unduly influencing each other, have independent candidate review and ranking. Incorporate diversity on your interview panels. And look at exit interviews if you have them. And if you don't, start them. And make sure that they're anonymous so that you try and get some honest feedback on where are some issues in your company that you may need to look at. I've included a bunch of resources on this slide for you to look at, and I would start with the implicit association tests. And these are tests that you can take online that will show you your own unconscious bias. Like I said, we all have them, and they will just help make you aware. And actually, that is what I've got for today. So we had a couple of technical mishaps, but thank you for hanging in with us. Definitely appreciate it. And I appreciate this opportunity to talk to all of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We appreciate it. If you want to unshare, and I can ask you, we have some questions in the Q&A for you. So let's start. The first question is from Rachel, and it says, DEI has been a priority as a chapter and with my company for a while, but we are always looking for ways to engage on a deeper level. Are there certification programs or trainings you'd recommend?
Wow, that is a great question. There are a lot of certification programs, and I don't want to get myself in trouble by recommending some over others. But I will say that right now, there are a lot of universities that are actually offering programs in DEI. When I first started, there were none. This was all sort of learn as you go. I think I would recommend, although I won't recommend a specific one, but I would recommend looking online. I know there's Cornell, there's Northwestern, there are a lot of others. And I think it's a great idea. So, and that would help with credibility.
Thank you. It says, the next question, oops, that just moved up. It says for folks, folks, I guess that's folks. Okay. So for folks just beginning their DEI journey, what is the best way to implement this retraining and authenticity and not just performative or for now?
Maybe you could repeat the question. If you're just starting out and you in your company, like what sorts of...
Yeah, what's the best way to implement this retraining with authenticity and not just, just doing it, we're doing it for now.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So yeah, that's an excellent, the assumption is right there in the question. So this is not a one-off. This is not like you get a training on diversity and then everybody has every tool that they need. This is ongoing, and everybody in the company should be trained on leadership. On diversity, including leadership, from entry level to leadership. Nobody should be exempt. There are, also other things that you can do if you want to try and implement diversity initiatives in your program, in your organization. And we talked about a lot of them. You may want to start with looking at your website and looking to see if you can translate it. You might want to start with, we talked about that the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and I'm sure that there are, we just happen to be in Illinois, but there are organizations all over the country that have free training. And even if it's not free, make sure that people get trained not just on diversity awareness, but also on unconscious bias. And that you'll see that this is an ongoing issue that you have to continue, constantly be retrained.
I have another question here.
Yes, absolutely.
As an applicant, should we mention our race, gender, ability when asked?
You shouldn't be asked. You should not be asked about your race, gender, or ability. That could get a company in trouble because there are laws that prevent discrimination in hiring on the basis of race, gender, and all of the other, religion, national origin, everything that we discussed. So if you, so basically a company should not be asking, like I say, unless there are a small sliver of jobs where it is what's called a bona fide occupational qualification, where it truly is required for the job, a certain gender, even in some cases a certain race, but honestly, generally it's not. Generally, it should not matter what your race is, what your gender is, in order to perform a job. So you should not be asked. That if you do happen to get asked, you might want to say, well, I'm curious about, what is it about the job that makes you ask? And then maybe you could just address what it is. Yes, I can perform that skill because I have this experience or background. And I would really just not get into having it come up as a topic. When I say that you should consider diversity in hiring, just be aware of the fact that most of the time we have images in our heads about what the desired candidate should look like. An engineer, for example, if I showed up for an engineer's job, I'm not the typical engineer looking person. So just to be aware as somebody on the business side, okay, well, we need to reimagine what an engineer looks like, and why not Lisa? As far as abilities, I also want to make the point that you definitely want to ask about what it is about the job that is bringing up the question, because there are reasonable accommodations that employers are required to provide to people with disabilities who need something like maybe like a stool or some breaks or something that is a minor inconvenience, or not even inconvenience, but is a minor creative workaround that will help the person perform the job. So really, if you're asked a question like that during an interview, I would really try and turn it back around to just find out what it is about the job that they are looking to address.
Okay. I think you pretty much answered the next question, but I'll read it anyway. From Richard, what are your thoughts on companies asking gender, race, and capabilities during the application process? Will this create a more or less diverse workforce?
So there are questions that can be asked as voluntary information. So in the application process, a lot of companies will ask, if you feel comfortable, would you let us know what race you identify with, what ethnicity you identify with, gender, and if you are a person with a disability. In many cases, they are tracking this information purely for government purposes or reporting purposes. And there should be a clear disclaimer on that form that they are not looking at individual information. It's really just to put the data into an aggregate so that they know, out of the people who applied, this percentage was African American or Latino.
The next question is from Susan. One of the major challenges companies I work with and their immigrant employees was the grasp of written communication skills. Technical qualifications were excellent, but even with courses designed to help, continuous improvement programs available and utilize, written skills still lack. To the point of being inflammatory or unprofessional, how do you address that?
Well, so again, I would go back to related to the job. So if there is, I think you said tech, but I'm not sure. Yeah. So in the tech field, you know, if you're, how, if, you know, what is it in the job that you need the written skill for? If it is to, and I'm just going to make stuff up since I'm not in the tech field, but if it is to write a how-to manual, for example, then you could, you know, use, tie it back to the job, look at samples, provide other samples that that can help highlight, you know, what it is, the point that you're trying to make. In terms of email, same thing, look at samples, but make it very concrete to the job. The last thing you want to do is to just suggest that there is something wrong with someone because of their immigrant status and something less than. So make sure that it's very closely anchored to whatever it is in your job. And I don't know if there's something else in the question. It was a little, but is that basically it? If there are poor writing skills, how do you address that?
Right. They want to, you know, like they have great technical skills. So they have great great computer skills, but, you know, their written skills might lack, you know, and how do you address that was kind of the basis of the question.
Like the population as a whole, but look at individuals and try and address each individual issue on its own.
The next question is from David, and it says, how can meeting planners for conferences incorporate diversity and inclusion into the program to build employee and/or client loyalty? What resources are there for speakers who can provide different viewpoints and perspectives?
So speakers at conferences?
Yeah, so like, so I'm thinking that David is a speaker, and so he's looking for resources for, how can he as a speaker, maybe if he's not diverse, how can he, help provide those different viewpoints?
Yeah. I mean, I would really look at the internet. The internet has a lot of really great information. I would look at the industry that you're
I'm
talking about.
correcting myself. He says he's not a speaker, he's a journalist, and he's going to write on the subject. So,
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, look at the industry and, like, for example, if you're looking for speakers in law, since that's my background, there are a lot of different bar associations that, are cater to various communities. And you might want to contact somebody in that bar association and say, we're looking for some, like the Asian American Bar Association or the Black Lawyers Association, and say, we are looking for different perspectives on this area of the law. Do you have any ideas? And there are these types of niche groups in industries all over. So I hope, let me also say that if I'm not understanding your question or not answering your question the way you'd like, feel free to contact me after the presentation and I can, help answer the question in a different way.
So I was going to say that would have to be the last question, but I have another, some more questions in here. So, I'm going to ask Alexandra if you can save those questions, and if you don't mind, Lisa, I'm going to get them over to you, and hopefully we can send them out with the survey, the answers to those as well. Like everybody, like Lisa said, you can feel free to contact her directly if you have any questions, or you can feel free to email me and I can pass those messages on to her as well. Lisa, we appreciate you, for this really great information and presentation today. We want to thank Giants Enterprises for continuing to be our sponsor, and thank every one of you for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we'll be seeing you very soon for our next webinar. Thank you.